every time someone dies who's in the public eye and is a controversial figure, we have this national conversation, or just people disagree about how are you supposed to respond to it. And there are some people who think no matter what a person did, no matter who they were, what they said, what they advocated for, the choices they made, we should all be really nice and pretend they were someone else when they died. And if you believe that, I understand it. Death is a serious thing, obviously. I think that bundled up in that sort of evaluation is our own views of how we'd like to be remembered when we die. And none of us are perfect. That is certainly true. That said, we keep it real about everything, and so we're gonna keep it real about these people too, especially, and this is really a special case. It is one thing to be a certain person, but if the only reason we know who you are is because you are that person, if you made your fortune being that person, not just saying things as a private citizen, but being very well compensated to say certain things, then we get to talk about that, and we get to talk about who they are, and we get to talk about who Rush Limbaugh is, because Rush Limbaugh was an aggressively awful person. That is the only reason anyone ever listened to him, is because he hated the people other people hated, and he gave them license to engage in not a 2-minute hate, but a 3 to 5 hour hate. I'm gonna talk about how bad black people are, so that you can listen to it, because you'd love to be in conversations about how bad black people are, but maybe society's made that too difficult. So I'm just gonna demonize them for you. And I'm gonna do that about women, I'm gonna do that about Muslims, I'm gonna do that about liberals, I'm gonna do that about women, everyone. I'm going to hate those people and make it cool for you to hate them too. And that's what he did, and he made millions of dollars doing it. I've got more, including specifics, but JR, you don't feel obligated to engage in any of this, but
no,
that's
okay,
who he is.
So, and sometimes the obvious nature of these types of figures has to be explained out the way that you're having to right now. So when someone is espousing hate over and over again and speaking to millions and millions of listeners, that normalizes the approach that they carry in every aspect of their life. Yes, they'll listen to 2 to 3 hours of Rush Limbaugh being a hateful radio personality, but then they go off and Miss Simpson is a teacher, and she teaches 3rd graders. And then she approaches the way that she teaches children and the things that have been coddled and galvanized by people like Rush Limbaugh. Then she goes in and she mistreats some students. We talk about all the time how teachers in their approach to students, and even from the top to the bottom, from maybe some business owner listens to Rush Limbaugh, and then his hiring practices were formed around those beliefs. Yeah, then you disenfranchise people. Maybe a doctor listened to Rush Limbaugh, and his approach to the way that he deals with his black patients was different. This thing changes the way people's mindsets are, and they're in every profession. We were surprised when we saw people at the Capitol insurrection, like, oh man, they're business owners. Man, some of them are lawyers, some of them are doctors. Oh man, they're accountants. Yes, they come from every level of professional life. All these professionals and people in all these aspects of life, there's plenty of racism people that like to build up this type of thought process behind the way that they approach every part of their life. That's why when people say, why you bring up race every time? Because race is always brought up to us. If we just want to point out how it's affecting us, and you said, how dare you keep talking about it? Well, Rush Limbaugh talked about it for decades, and he made sure that your mindset was a certain way. And that, honestly, it was a detriment to society. Let's keep it
100. Like, if there are of the bad things about American society, obviously none of all of that can be traced back to one person. But I think he has a bigger claim than the vast majority of people for why we're so tribal and small and hateful and xenophobic and completely avoidant of critical thinking or self-analysis, conspiratorial, and just hateful and fearful. And it's not just that Rush Limbaugh was that way and that he gave people a show of that. He made people more like that. He made tons of people want to be like him in right-wing media. There are people just doing impersonations of Rush Limbaugh, and that's their whole career, and they still are doing it. Even though he was on radio or whatever, that's what he was. And it wasn't just he was that way 50 years ago. Personally, I think that would be bad enough. He was awful up until he died, telling people that the coronavirus was the common cold. Okay, when you use your platform to get people killed, we're not gonna be super kind to you when you die. We're not gonna pretend that it's a national tragedy. It is a tragedy on a personal level, like it is when anyone dies, including the people who probably died because they believed misinformation about the coronavirus that was given to them by people like Rush Limbaugh. And really fast, I know that JR thinks this is pointless, like that we would remind people of the horrible things that Rush Limbaugh said. And certainly we could just do that for months straight. But like when he was saying that Susan Fluke was a slut, that she was paid to have sex when she testified before a congressional committee, or claim that Kamala Harris is not a person of color, or that Michelle Obama needs to get over slavery, that the New Zealand mosque shooting was a false flag, that, oh God, the stuff about Matt Lauer, I don't even want to engage with that. Let's
disgusting.
See. In 2011, while the president of China was speaking, he said Hu Jintao was just going ching cha, ching chang cho chow, cha chow, ching cho, chi ba ba ba. That was what he said on his show. And that is the merest smattering of the whole, like that was his show. You could go and for 3 hours, it would be horrible, racist, misogynistic stuff. That is who he was, that is all that he was. And thankfully, while there's a lot of people whose reputation will be rewritten, and maybe there's a little bit of that going on today, everybody's going to remember who he was because that's all he was, and he was that way for a very long time.
Yeah, if I see headlines calling, talk radio icon, and honestly, it's a stain on that profession that's an icon in that business. That business sucks. That type of person can be an icon, or society sucks because that person can be an icon in a business that spreads that kind of information, those kind of sentiments to so many people. That's an icon. And by the way, he was, because that's what humans made him. Yeah. Because humans believe that same stuff he does. There's a lot of work to be done in our society because instead of us, now fighting over, was he a good guy or a bad guy? Oh man, look, he was on my side, but he wasn't on your side. The society needs to fix itself and find out why. After those 5 things that you point out that he has done and said, doesn't come with 100% disgust from people. Mm-hmm. That if you say that to someone who's a supporter of this guy, that they won't go, man, that's disgusting. I really regret ever thinking a positive thing about that guy. The same way that many of them react when you say, hey, so what do you think about David Duke? For some reason, that line for a majority of them doesn't get crossed because he's solidified as a racist icon. When honestly, Rush Limbaugh potentially has more of a racist icon background than David Duke does. I think
David Duke wasn't as popular. If David Duke was more popular, maybe, look at Tucker Carlson. People don't really identify what he is. We try. Because he has a lot of people who view him. Donald Trump, we have to debate whether he's a racist. When they become popular enough, the horrible things that they've said and done suddenly don't seem to count anymore. And we're trying to make sure that they count. And not just about him, but in general, like I tweeted. If you want people to be nice to you when you die, make choices that lead to that. I believe in incentives, and I think that falsely pretending that people were angels when they die provides a horrible set of incentives while they live. If you want your legacy to be great, be great. If you want people to say that you were nice and kind and empathetic and all of that, maybe do those things every once in a while. That would be my advice to you.
And let's keep it real. Okay, whether you believe in afterlife, God, heaven or hell, or any of that stuff, whether you're an atheist or a believer in any kind of religion, across all those lines, the deceased aren't really worried about what you're saying right now.
That's also true.
Real. So, and this again, that crosses all of them. So, anything that you have to say about who Rush Limbaugh really was today, that's only affecting other folks that are listening to it, and other folks that maybe want to be him. So, if our general idea of who this guy was is looked down upon because we don't want to continue to cultivate more of these type of people, we don't need to celebrate the things that he did and said. Why? Just because he was here?
Yeah.
There's been plenty of people here that say and do horrible things. Why aren't we honoring all of them?
Yeah, that's true.
Check out the Damage Report podcast each day, wherever you get your podcasts, whether Pocket Casts or Stitcher or iTunes. You can join me as I give you the news and stories you want, with a range of co-hosts and interview guests jumping in on the fun each day. Again, that's the Damage Report, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you get them at iTunes, don't forget to rate and review. Sometimes I'll read them live on the show.